This story proves Kyle wasn't always a sharpshooting badass. As a kid, he spent the weekend at a Boy Scout shooting camp out, where he and 4 others got to shoot clay targets. When Kyle's turn came to shoot the shotgun, he shouted, "Pull!" and the manager launched a clay target into the sky. As he went to shoot, Kyle's finger slipped and he accidentally switched the gun to safety mode. Seeing that it didn't fire, Kyle decided it would be a good idea to look down the barrel and pull the trigger a few times. While doing this, he accidentally switched the safety off and the gun fired. Luckily, he didn't blow his whole fucking face off, but he did lose a few hairs.
When Spinal Palm was in primary school, around 8 years old, everyone in his class noticed he had birthmarks covering most of the left side of his body. Spinal Palm thought that everyone had the same birthmarks, but after all the questions, he realized he was different. Not wanting to look stupid for not knowing what they were, he told everyone that the marks came from bees stinging him after he took an entire hive by himself. He didn't actually think anyone would believe him, but to his surprise, the story spread around the school like wildfire. Even the teachers believed his lie. Students would ask to hear the story over and over again. A few years passed and Spinal Palm had moved to a secondary school that no one from his old school attended, until one day a new student started and recognized him. During break, he asked him how his bee stings were. Not wanting to carry on the lie, Spinal Palm just told him the truth. The expression on his face was similar to that of a child being told that Santa wasn't real.
When Zaragamba was in high school, he and some students had to go and talk to some 8th graders about what high school would be like. When they said everything they had to say, they decided to open it up for questions. One boy shot his hand up, so Zaragamba picked him. The boy stood up, he cleared his throat, and then he asked with a straight face if the memes were danker in high school. The 50 students present went into an uproar from all the cringe. It took the teacher almost 10 minutes to calm them all down.
Ladybot used to work as a lifeguard at a beach in a conservative town and was often questioned by religious people about her beliefs. This could get a little uncomfortable since several members of the staff weren't exactly straight. She generally tried to keep that information secret for obvious reasons. One day though, a middle-aged mother ran up to her, red-faced with her son in tow. She yelled at Ladybot, "Why are you trying to impurify my son with your unholy desires?"
About 3 months ago, Mimi and her boyfriend went to a fancy restaurant together. Out of nowhere, a waitress bumped into the back of Mimi's chair, knocking her face into her plate of spaghetti. The waitress apologized and Mimi went to the bathroom to get cleaned up. When she washed her face, her makeup came off as well. When Mimi got back to her table, her boyfriend looked disgusted. He said that Mimi looked horrible without makeup and that things just weren't working out. And then he left. A week later, Mimi found out that he was cheating on her anyway. What a jerk.
When Doopy was in 9th grade, she dated a boy she had a lot in common with. They liked video games and making art. One day, their parents took them to a restaurant where they sat at separate tables. He started talking about Overwatch and said that he'd been playing it non-stop since it came out. Doopy said,
I'm not really into the game.
And started explaining why. He began to shake his fist violently and looked really, really mad. Then, midway through her explanation, he got up and started yelling at her, saying, "You'll never be as good as Overwatch, and I hate you!" That made everyone at the restaurant stare at him. After his childish meltdown, he stormed out of the restaurant. His parents awkwardly apologized for his behavior and rushed out after him.
Gooby was scrolling through Facebook one day, enjoying a relaxing evening of watching funny pet videos when she saw her friend Emoji's video post. The caption read, "I was there $10 to do this." She chuckled and thought, "Oh, this ought to be good." In the video, he had a cup of water and a fistful of something. As she watched, he explains how his buddies had always tried to get him to take this dare, but now he's finally doing it. $10 to eat mouse turds. She put her phone down for a minute and stared at the wall, trying to wrap her head around it. Finally, she mustered up the courage to watch the rest of the video. And he did it. 10 whole mouse turd. Ah. Nasty.
When Shima was in elementary school, she loved to secretly eat paper. She'd done this for years and had never gotten caught. But one day, while Shima was enjoying some papery goodness, she noticed that one of her classmates was looking at her weirdly. The classmate asked what Shima was doing, and Shima said, "Nothing," with a mouthful of paper. The kids ended up telling their teacher, who called Shima's parents. When Shima got home, she got a huge lecture about why we don't eat paper. Shima was super embarrassed and had to slowly kick her delicious habit.
When Zaraganba was 21, he broke up with his crazy girlfriend of 3 years. She told him that if she ever saw him again, she would stab him in 3 different places for the number of years they dated. The places she chose were the head, the pelvis, and the chest. 2 years later, Zaraganba was out with his new girlfriend at a restaurant when he saw his ex. His ex quickly grabbed the knife she was using to cut her food with and sprinted towards him. Remembering her threat, Zaraganba shit his pants, grabbed his girlfriend, and bolted to his car. They stayed in there for a couple of hours, waiting for the police to arrive. While they waited in his car, his ex-girlfriend kept banging on his window. The police finally showed up and took her away. Later on, Zaraganba found out that she was high on drugs, and it was the last time he ever saw her.
When I was 3 years old, I used to watch a lot of television. I even liked the commercials. They were big and epic, and crazy things would happen all the time. One of the more over-the-top ones being the Kool-Aid Man. The kids would scream, "Hey, Kool-Aid!" and he'd come busting in. And even at that age, I know what would happen if I broke anything in the house. I would be regretting it for months on end. Not just from being grounded, but just from the ass beating I'd get. Also, I was kind of terrified by the Kool-Aid Man, so I never dare scream his name. Even though he never comes in when you scream it. I figured it out these days. Hey, Kool-Aid! Oh, yeah! Oh, Christ, get away! Stop, no! So as tempted as I was to scream, "Hey, Kool-Aid!" to test it out, I would never dare do it. Not just because the Kool-Aid Man was kind of fucking scary, but also I didn't want my parents to beat me anymore. That's a bit too real.
Back when she was in grade school, Honeybit's parents wanted her to get good grades. One day, she forgot to do her homework, so her mom told her to stand in the corner. When Honeybit stood in the corner, her mom had her sister do horrible things to her, such as stick gum in her hair. The torment went on for half an hour, and Honeybits was good for the rest of her school years.
About a year ago, Pandora was standing in her living room when all of the sudden, her little sister ran in with a fake knife. She handed it to Pandora and said, "Pretend to stab me." She took the knife and stared at her sister, who pulled out a couple of packs of ketchup, placing some sauce on her shirt and the tip of the knife. Before Pandora could ask why, her sister fell down and pretended to be dead. At this moment, Pandora's brother came into the room carrying his Nerf gun. He was ranting about how their little sister had spilt water on his homework. I guess playing dead was her way of avoiding the wrath of his deadly, evil, powerful, fear-inducing Nerf gun.
So one day, as me and my boyfriend were getting kinky, I decided to go down on him. But he likes to make a joke out of everything, so as I was going down on him, he said in the voice of Randy Marsh,
Oh, whoa, no way.
and I remember just laughing so hard that I needed at least 10 minutes to catch my breath before trying again.
Weirdest thing that I have ever seen at a friend's house was this room that my friend called the fish room. It was actually his grandfather's collector's room, to be specific, as he collected those motion-activated bass fish that would sing whenever you walked past them. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about. Well, my friend told me to step into the room and just enjoy the music. He opened the door to the small bedroom. I stepped inside, and immediately all of these frickin' fish turned their heads and began to sing. And guys, there were plastic bass fish on every inch of the walls, so the noise was loud, deafening, and a garbled mesh of various country songs. And I loved every second of it.
McKylum tried getting rid of some old toys by starting a yard sale. Being only 7 years old, he didn't have any signs. The only thing he had was a pile of toys at his grandparents' house, which was where he was staying. His grandfather decided to give him $5 to begin with. McKylum was so excited that he spun around and threw the money in the air. A few seconds after it landed, he pretended that it wasn't his for some reason and even let another kid have it. When McKylum went inside, he had a small conversation with his grandfather. He asked him where the money went, and McKylum told him that he lost it. After his grandfather asked how that happened, McKylum answered with a silly lie.
I was spinning around when I threw the money in the air. I thought it was a bird, but when it landed on the ground, I didn't think it was mine, so I let another kid have it.
Though it didn't make any sense, he still got away with it. Pretty sure Grandpa was just a bit disappointed.
Hellbent was at the mall with his mom and 2 younger brothers. That day, he was going commando. A group of cute girls were walking towards them, and Hellbent's youngest brother decided to de-pants him in the middle of the mall. Hellbent was so embarrassed his face instantly turned red. He pulled up his pants, then ran to the nearest restroom and punched his brother until he cried. That was the last time he ever went commando.
When Zaragamba was younger, he worked in a dead-end retail job where he saw a lot of weird customers. But by far, the creepiest was a seemingly sweet old lady who came in to buy a new toaster. When she got to the counter, she looked Zaragamba in the eyes and was totally transfixed. Zaragamba said,
"That'll be $60, thanks."
but the old lady didn't hear him. Instead, she said, "You have a friendly smile. It reminds me of my grandson's smile before he was killed." Zaragamba laughed nervously and tried to process the sale as quickly as possible. He decided not to try and sell her the extended warranty.
One time, Dolan got detention during an after-school thing while their parents were still at work. The reason he got detention was because while another kid talked, Dolan breathed with his mouth open. The aides saw that, thinking he was the one talking, when it was the other kid. Dolan got detention for hours and couldn't go out to do anything until his parents picked him up.
About 3 years ago, Talop became pretty good friends with a guy at his work. After they became friends, he started telling Talop about bronies and why he saw them as a bad thing. Not just the fandom, but anything to do with My Little Pony in general. He even judged the My Little Pony haters. He didn't care what side they were on, he saw them all as being wrong with the world. Ironically, the more he talked about bronies, the more curious Talop got. So Talop decided to check it out, and he became a fan of the show himself. For the next year and a half, Talop tried to avoid talking about the fact that he had gotten into My Little Pony. Eventually, the lies started piling up, and Talop just outright told him that he had basically been a brony ever since shortly after he started talking about them. At first, it seemed like he had accepted it, until he casually mentioned that they hadn't been friends in over a year because Talop had, quote, become a hollow shell of his former self. In hindsight, he wasn't really a good friend if Talop simply liking a TV show about colorful ponies was enough to destroy their friendship.
Pandora once saw a kid, hellbent, strip to his underwear and run through the hallways yelling,
"Hey girls, look at my fresh apples!"
She turned her head away and, as soon as she opened her locker, he fell. She was going to help him up when a girl yelled, "Oh my gosh, Pandora, stop banging him!" Pandora was so ticked that she accidentally made the girl slip and land in a puddle of apple juice. Sid worked at a theatre as an actor, and when he was in a production of Peter Pan, an audience member came up to him after the show and said, "I think you should have filled the auditorium with water for the mermaid scene. It would have made it more believable." The person was completely serious, without even a sign of sarcasm in their voice.
When Pandora was just 13, her friend asked her to watch some dirty stuff. At first, she said,
What kind of question is that? Of course not.
He just glared back at her, begging her to watch it with him. She watched for only 2 minutes and was already feeling really awkward and trying not to gag. Her friend said, "Be right back, Pandora. Stay here. I gotta use the bathroom." She nodded and was about to get up to get a snack when she felt that somebody was watching her. Pandora turned around to see her friend's sister standing there holding a cup of milk, looking at the screen. At first, Pandora wondered why, but then realized the dirty stuff was still on. She looked from the sister to the screen, and then back to the sister, and then back to the screen one more time. She was doing her best not to sweat. When her friend came back and saw the scene, he just stood there, staring at his sister as she looked at both of them, with her mouth dangling open. And so, without saying a word, Pandora grabbed her bag and slowly walked out the door.
One time, Emoji was at Hot Topic with a few friends and her mum, who was a huge My Chemical Romance fan at the time. Suddenly, the store started playing Welcome to the Black Parade. Emoji's mum froze and started screaming the song. Emoji asked her many times to stop, but she wouldn't. So Emoji and her friends figured it was best if they just left her mother standing there in the middle of Hot Topic singing to no one. Emoji has never been more embarrassed in her life.
In 5th grade, Pandora was taking a math test on the school computer while chewing gum. About halfway through the test, she suddenly started choking. For what felt like ages, no one in her class helped her. They just stared in disbelief. Meanwhile, she was so scared and trying desperately to get the gum out. She drooled all over the keyboard and was able to save herself just before she ran out of oxygen. It was a close call, and she even managed to pass the test.
When Andy once worked in a clothing store, a pair of customers walked into the store, grabbed a few expensive shirts, and walked up to the counter. They looked at her and said, "Hey, I don't want to spend money, so could I have these shirts for free?" When Andy said no, they looked like their brains exploded. "But please, I don't want to spend money." She refused again, so they picked up the shirts and just sort of put them back on a pile of other shirts. They looked super disappointed and walked out of the store. Andy stood there completely confused by what just happened.
Emoji's mom once took him to a very fancy restaurant in the summer. The waiter came and gave them the menus. The waiter forgot about their table and returned an hour later with arms full of food. Emoji's mom was confused because they were yet to order anything. The waiter placed a huge salad and lamb chops in front of Emoji. His mom stood up to find the waiter, but Emoji was so hungry he dove straight in. A few bites in, Emoji's throat swelled up and he started choking. The salad had nuts, which he was very allergic to. When his mom returned, she screamed and immediately called an ambulance. Safe to say, they did not return to that fancy restaurant.
When Pandora was little, her mom was not very nice to her. Over time, Pandora got so sick of her mom's behavior that she decided to run away from home. For a while, Pandora was happy, but then her terrifying mother found her. Her punishment was to be kept inside and have all of her electronics taken away. That sounds pretty normal, right? Well, this punishment lasted 2 whole years. Now that all that time has passed, Pandora acts like a total angel, but she secretly still hates her mom's guts.
One time, Spinal Palm was catching the train home when he overheard 2 girls talking. At first, it seemed like a normal conversation, but he soon realized they were talking about which of their boyfriends had the biggest penis. It started as a nice, respectful discussion, but it quickly blew up into an argument. Before long, they were yelling things like,
I bet your boyfriend's ding-dong is the size of a porcupine's!
and
Yeah, well, your boyfriend's dick is the size of a Tic Tac.
Spinal Palm was literally in tears trying to hold back his laughter.
In middle school, Doopy was in her Spanish class when her teacher told the class to read a book in Spanish. Instead of choosing a Spanish book, Doopy decided to read Hamilton. After getting bored with it, she put it away and noticed a kid next to her take out his phone and play on it. Being dumb, she decided to take her phone out and play on it as well. She ended up playing on it for most of the period, but later on, she was oblivious to her teacher walking towards her. It was too late when Doopy noticed her teacher a few feet from her. She tried putting her phone in her purse, but the teacher said, "Give it to me." Doopy replied nervously,
It fell out of my bag.
The teacher just smiled and stuck out her hand.
But it fell out of my bag.
Doopy said again. The teacher said, No, give it to me." Doopy was getting pissed, her cheeks turning red. Everyone's eyes were on her. Some of her classmates even whispered, "She's getting in trouble," or She's getting her phone taken away. So she sighed, took out her phone, and put it in the palm of her teacher's hand. Her teacher smirked and said, "Thank you." Yet the kid next to her, who had taken out his phone first, never had his phone taken away or even got in trouble. One day when Dolan was in middle school, he had to go to the bathroom really bad. He asked the teacher if he could go, and he said that he could. So he walked out of the classroom and to the bathroom. But when Dolan opened the bathroom door, he saw one of the special needs kids squatting in the corner with his pants off, taking a shit and pissing in the fucking corner, even though the toilet was right next to him. In disgust, Dolan shut the door and ran back to class, telling himself to never ever use the bathroom in his school ever again.
When Doopy was at school, she was sitting at an important exam. Everyone was finishing writing when the teacher told everyone to put their pens down. The kid sitting next to Doopy realized he had instantly failed and started to rage. The guy was screaming that the exam was rigged and it was all unfair. He was so angry he stormed out of the room. Doopy and a few students followed him out of amusement. He went straight to the principal's office, walked in, dropped his pants and took a piss all over the principal's desk. It was insane. People still talk about it to this day.
One time when he was 14, Dolan and his family went on a vacation. He was playing a game called What Are the Odds with his brother Zaraganba. Their dad overheard them and wanted to play, so Dolan explained the game to him. Then Zaraganba asked their dad,
"What are the odds you publicly humiliate yourself?"
Well, their dad ended up losing the game, meaning he had to humiliate himself in public. Later, they were all standing in a huge crowd of people in the middle of a city, and their dad went up to a woman who was walking with her friend. He stood right in front of them and screamed as if he was in agony. He dropped to his knees and yelled, "Why would you leave me?" He then proceeded to cry. Everyone around them stared at the scene, including Dolan and Zaraganba. The woman started to cry as well and leaned on her friend. Her friend angrily slapped their dad across the face and yelled, "Her husband just died, you sick fuck!" Their dad was absolutely mortified, and everyone around them looked at him as though they wanted to punch him. Since he wasn't good with stress, their dad fainted on the sidewalk. Dolan and Zaraganba carried him to a nearby restaurant while apologizing to everyone.
When Snoopy was in 2nd grade, she had a test that didn't make any sense to her or her friend Gooby. So they decided to create a really clever plan to cheat. They wrote math problems on the back of Snoopy's tie-dye t-shirt in colors only Gooby could see and not the teacher. Gooby copied off of it because she sat right behind her, and she gave Snoopy a signal as to what the answer was. The signaling system was cough twice for A, cough 3 times for B, sneeze plus cough was C, and sneeze plus cough twice was D. It worked, but their teacher might have been onto them because she gave them the scariest look ever.
A few years ago, Melissa was in the audience in a panel where the voice actress for Vanille from Final Fantasy XIII was speaking. And suddenly, there was yelling from outside the room. Everybody looked as Spider-Man ran past, shortly followed by the Blue Power Ranger, and then Rainbow Dash. The VA just said, "I could never have imagined anything like that happening." And yet it did. When Sidious was in 7th grade, he had a substitute teacher who yelled at him for leaving class to get a drink of water. A few weeks later, the substitute came back. She yelled at Sidious again. She told him to go to the principal's office and, being confused, he asked, "Why?" Just then, she pulled out a 7-inch knife and told him to go to the principal's office for detention, or she would slit his throat. Sidious followed her commands and got suspended for a week. After leaving school, he told the principal that the substitute threatened him with a knife. She was fired and sent to jail for 40 years for attempted 2nd-degree murder and for being drunk.
Well, one time Ladybot created a rumor in her elementary school that there was an evil clown that lived in the tree far into the field. She had made up this rumor to keep people away from the tree because she hid some of her stuff in it. She even took off and scattered fabric from an old red sweater she had to convince people. The rumor got so bad that the school had to send a note home to all the parents stating that there was no clown.
One time in 9th grade, Honeybits and her science class were having an end of the year party. They plowed through the bowls of chips, cookies, punch, everything. Soon everything was gone but one crunchy Cheeto in a snack bowl. 2 kids started arm wrestling for it, while another pair played cards for it. Another pair had a staring contest. While Honeybit's classmates had their different contests, she snuck over the bowl and ate it. When they finally saw that the Cheeto was gone, they all started accusing each other of stealing it. It got so bad the principal had to come and shut the whole thing down.